All right, guys, I'm going to explain levels to you. So as we talked about, your adjustments, your adjustment layers are all located right here under the adjustment layer dialog box. The top row represents all exposure ones. The middle row represents ways you can change the color of your photo. And the bottom represents funky things you can do. So the first one we're going to do exposure, and for exposure we only use the levels tool, which looks like a lot of little spiky lines. Those spiky lines are hopefully somewhat familiar from last week's Photoshop demo, which shows us a histogram. A histogram represents the data in your photo. So what I can see from this photo is that there are both a lot of shadows, but there's also a lot of white areas or bright lights in it. So it's a pretty well overall adjusted photo. What I'd say is if there was more data here, we would say this is a well exposed photo. The black slider represents how to move your shadows. The middle represents the overall midtones, or like the middle lighting, the overall exposure of the image, and the white represents the highlights. So if I were to move my middle towards my light area, it is essentially extending the shadows, so it has made my image darker. And if I were to move my middle part over to the now the shadow side, it is extending my highlights, and it has made my image brighter. So this is back in the middle. So if I wanted to adjust for lighting, I would bring my shadows and my highlight slider to where I see spikes in data. So for example, I moved my highlight slider to where I saw the first set of data start right here, the spike. For my black slider or my shadow slider, I'm going to move it to the top of this point because this is where I see some data. So I can tell because of my histogram that this is now a decently well exposed image. Oop, that's the wrong one. Well, but but you can do a lot of this just by using your eyes. So if you and knowing your image and what you want. So for example, if you want a lighter photo, you might adjust the middle part so that we see overall a lot more brights, and then move our dark black slider in. And let's say now we have a pretty well exposed photo. So that's the layers adjustment. Hopefully that helps. Oops, that was the levels.